Nobody asked Mewtwo if it wanted to exist. That is, the complete origin story before the franchise ever put it on screen. The burned-out mansion on Cinnabar Island gives the story as scattered journal fragments, forcing the player to assemble the timeline from ruins instead of from an explanation. The dates form a cold laboratory sequence: a creature discovered in Guyana named Mew, then Mew giving birth to Mewtwo months later, followed by the researchers admitting it became far too powerful. The final journal entry says they failed to curb its vicious tendencies. After that, the mansion is ruined and everyone who worked there is gone. The Pokedex fills in what the journal avoids. Mewtwo was created through horrific gene splicing and DNA engineering experiments, and the word horrific has been official from the beginning. Later games returned to the same basement and added glass containers, including one large enough for a procedure, marked as if something had struck it repeatedly from the inside. The franchise gives no annotation for the broken glass. Only the same old building, the same old basement, and marks left where the origin should have been explained. Mewtwo is number 150, while Mew is 151, meaning the official record places the clone before the source, and has kept that order for 30 years. In the original 51, Mew comes last, so the archive itself feels like a filing cabinet where the copy was processed before anyone filed the original. Mewtwo's classification is genetic Pokemon, while other legendary creatures are classified by what they do or how they appear. Articuno is freeze, Zapdos is electric, Moltres is flame, but Mewtwo's label points only to how it was made. In the franchise's own taxonomy, Mewtwo is defined by origin rather than nature, like a living being reduced to a lab invoice category. The Fire Red entry adds that Mewtwo's battle abilities were raised to the ultimate level through gene manipulation, so it thinks only of defeating its foes. The entry does not frame that aggression as natural temperament, it frames it as the outcome of a process performed on Mewtwo by someone else. The competitive record reflects the same idea, with Generation 1 Mewtwo described as one of the most destructive creatures in the history of the format. Every stat category is exceptional, including the ones usually considered secondary, with its special stat and speed turning ordinary balance into a clerical emergency. Smogon placed Mewtwo in Ubers, a tier separate from standard competitive play, because including it would make standard play about managing Mewtwo instead of competing normally. Mewtwo has never really belonged to standard play. Across 30 years and 9 generations, the competitive ecosystem kept building around the fact that it had to be separated. In Generation 9, the tier finally became crowded enough that some creatures can outspeed Mewtwo, something that would have sounded impossible in earlier generations. Even after the meta grew around it and faster threats appeared, Mewtwo is still in Ubers, still treated as something standard rules cannot absorb. The first theatrical film made Mewtwo's central question explicit: whether a being created for a purpose is bound to that purpose, and whether origin determines identity. Mewtwo decided the answer was no, erased everyone's memory of the events, and left alone with enough psychic force to remove the experience from everyone else. The humans and creatures woke up without the memory, while Mewtwo alone remembered what happened, what it decided, and what it chose not to become. The later Pokedex entry says that, although Mewtwo was created by genetic manipulation, even the harshest creature expresses a certain gentleness, treating that gentleness as something that survived the procedure. Generation 6 split Mewtwo into 2 mega evolutions: one path toward physical dominance, larger and more imposing, and another toward psychic maximization with an extreme special attack profile. Both mega forms come from the same origin point, but both require an external stone to activate, and both revert when the battle ends. The Mega Mewtwo Y entry says only a trainer strong enough to fully control it is absolutely peerless, framing the form through control rather than cooperation. From Generation 5 onward, Mewtwo's ability is Pressure. Every opposing move costs extra resources simply because Mewtwo is present. Pressure has no flavor text. The name itself is the description, as if the room starts paying a tax for standing near it. In Cerulean Cave, Mewtwo waits at the end of Red and Blue, but the cave is sealed until the player has beaten the Elite Four and become champion. The only creature that requires you to dominate the entire regional competitive structure before meeting it is the one the system created and failed to contain. When you finally reach Mewtwo, it is just sitting in a cave. The researchers are gone, the mansion is burned, and the journals are scattered across the ruin. There is no one left to explain to Mewtwo what it is, why it was made, or what was supposed to happen next. The franchise put Mewtwo there in 1996, and has returned to the same question for 30 years without resolving it. The word horrific is still in the text, the glass still has marks on it, and Mewtwo is still in Ubers. The researchers called the vicious tendencies a failure to curb, but the entries suggest those tendencies were the outcome their own experiments produced. The researchers wanted a weapon with controllable aggression, but instead they produced something that understood exactly what had been done to it. The cave is where the franchise leaves that understanding. Nobody asked Mewtwo to exist, and there is nowhere else for it to go. One more mansion detail matters because the game gives no reason to look twice. The journals are not arranged in chronological order. The player finds the later September entry before the earlier July entries, so Mewtwo's origin is discovered backward and out of sequence. That wrong sequence mirrors how Mewtwo itself would understand its own origin. No context, no beginning, only fragments left behind by other people. The game turns disorientation into level design, making the player assemble trauma structurally without ever naming the feeling. For 30 years, the franchise has handled Mewtwo this way. The information is present, but the sequence is missing. The person who could explain the origin is gone, so the player and Mewtwo both work backward from ruins. Mewtwo later appears in raids, fighting games, films, spin-offs, and fan theories about what the mansion used to be. It became one of the most recognizable fictional creatures of the last 30 years, with its face used across merchandise on every continent. The franchise built a huge commercial machine around a creature whose own classification still describes it as a genetic product. The final researcher wrote that the project had failed, but the franchise built 30 years of success on top of that failure. The franchise never suggests that Mewtwo received any explanation for why it exists, who decided it would exist, or what any of it was supposed to mean. The final image is brutally simple. The cave is still there, Mewtwo is still in it, and the unanswered question never leaves.